The sun blazed mercilessly over the dry plains of Arizona Territory in the late 1800s. Dust rose from the hooves of a lone horseman riding through the wasteland, his hat tilted low, his coat ragged from travel. The man was Jake Callahan, a weathered cowboy known in nearby towns for his quiet nature and hard work. He had been driving cattle for weeks when he spotted something strange near a dry creek bed, small footprints and the faint sound of crying. Jake dismounted, his boots crunching on dry soil, as he followed the sound deeper into the brush. There, beneath a twisted mesquite tree, sat a little Apache girl no older than 7. Her dark hair was tangled, her face streaked with tears and dust. She clutched a small beaded doll to her chest, eyes wide with fear as Jake approached. "Easy. Now, little one," he said softly, crouching to her level. She didn't answer, only stared. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare and bruised. Jake could tell she'd been lost for days. The remnants of a burned camp lay not far away, evidence of a raid or an ambush. He sighed, lifting his hat. "You're safe now, darlin'. I'll get you out of here." Jake wrapped her in his coat and lifted her onto his horse. The girl trembled at first, unused to the gentle touch. He offered her water, which she gulped greedily. He didn't know her name, so he simply called her Little Bird. She clung to him as they rode toward the town of Dusty Creek, where he hoped to find help. The sun dipped low, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold. When they arrived, townsfolk stopped and stared. An Apache child with a white cowboy was not something they saw every day. But Jake didn't care. He took her straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Miller frowned when he saw the child. "You know what kind of trouble that brings, Jake," he warned. "Folks here don't take kindly to Indians." Jake's jaw tightened. "She's just a child, Miller. You want me to leave her out there to die?" The sheriff sighed, scratching his beard. "There's no orphanage that'll take her. You'd be better off taking her yourself." Jake looked down at Little Bird, who held tightly to his leg, trembling. Something inside him shifted, a feeling he hadn't known since his own daughter had died years ago. He nodded slowly. "Then she stays with me." The weeks that followed were quiet, but hard. Jake built her a small bed in his cabin, taught her simple English words, and cooked meals over the old stove. Little Bird rarely spoke, but she watched everything he did. Slowly, she began to smile again. She followed him out to the stables, fed the horses, and laughed when they nuzzled her hands. Jake would sometimes catch her humming soft Apache songs by the fire, her voice gentle as the desert wind. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty anymore. He had someone to care for again. One evening, as the wind howled across the plains, a group of riders appeared at the edge of the ranch. Jake's hand went to his rifle instinctively. The riders wore Apache garments, their faces stern but not hostile. One of them, a tall woman with dark braids and proud eyes, dismounted first. She looked straight at Little Bird, who gasped and ran toward her, shouting something in Apache. The woman dropped to her knees and embraced the girl tightly. Jake stood frozen. It was clear. This was her mother. The woman turned to him, tears glistening on her cheeks. "You found my daughter," she said in accented English. Jake lowered his hat respectfully. "She was lost out near the creek bed. I didn't know anyone had survived." The woman nodded, her voice trembling. "Our village was attacked by bandits, not soldiers. Many were killed. I searched for her for days." Her eyes softened as she looked at Jake. "You saved her life." He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "Just did what any decent man would do." The woman smiled faintly. Not many decent men left out here. There was strength and sorrow in her face, but also a quiet grace that struck Jake deeply. Her name, she said, was Nita. Nita and her people stayed the night at Jake's ranch. They spoke by the fire, sharing food and stories. Jake learned about the hardships her tribe faced, the losses they endured, and how Nita had been widowed during a raid years ago. She had lived with pain but never lost her spirit. Little Bird slept soundly that night, her mother watching over her with tears of relief. Before dawn, Nita told Jake they would return to their new camp in the mountains. Jake nodded, though something inside him tightened. He had grown attached to the girl and unexpectedly to her mother. As Nita prepared to leave, she turned to Jake. "You are welcome to visit our camp," she said softly. "Little Bird speaks of you as her father now." Jake's throat tightened. "She's a fine girl," he murmured. Nita smiled, her eyes warm. "You have a good heart, Cowboy." Then, with a final nod, she rode off with her people, Little Bird waving goodbye from horseback. Jake stood there long after they disappeared, into the desert haze, feeling the quiet settle around him again, but the silence wasn't the same. It felt lonelier now. He couldn't shake the thought of her or her mother's gentle eyes. Weeks passed. Jake went back to work on the ranch, mending fences and tending cattle, but his mind often drifted to the Apache camp in the mountains. One afternoon he decided to ride out there, bringing supplies and blankets as an excuse. When he arrived, the camp welcomed him cautiously at first, but when Little Bird saw him, she ran to him laughing, and Nita smiled from her fire. "I told them you would come," she said. Jake grinned shyly. "Figured you could use some help around here." That day he worked alongside the Apache men, earning their respect through hard labor and humility. As days turned to weeks, Jake found himself visiting more often. He repaired wagons, taught the boys how to shoe horses, and shared his food with the tribe. In return, Nita taught him Apache words, their meanings rich with poetry. They talked beneath starlit skies about loss, hope, and the cruel hand of fate. Slowly, affection grew between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. She was a widow, and he was a man who thought he'd forgotten how to feel. But in the quiet of the desert, heart spoke without words. Little Bird would often fall asleep between them as they watched the embers fade. One day, trouble rode into Dusty Creek. A group of bounty hunters had heard of an Apache camp in the hills and planned to clear it out for protection money. When Jake caught wind of it, he saddled up without a second thought. He rode hard through the night, arriving at the camp just as dawn broke. "They're coming," he warned Nita, breathless. The tribe prepared to defend themselves, but Jake refused to let blood be spilled. When the bounty riders appeared, he stood alone before them, his rifle across his chest. "Turn around," he said coldly. "Ain't no war here." The men laughed, but Jake's stance didn't waver. "You fire one shot," he warned, "and I swear you'll regret it." Behind him, Nita's tribe stood silent but ready. Something in Jake's eyes, fierce, unyielding, made the riders hesitate. One finally spat on the ground and turned his horse. "Ain't worth dying for savages," he muttered. They rode off, dust trailing behind. Nita ran to Jake, relief flooding her face. "You risked your life for us," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Guess I had something worth fighting for." She touched his hand gently, and in that moment they both understood what it meant. After that day, Jake stayed with the Apache more often than not. The town called him foolish, some even traitor, but he didn't care. He had found peace among the people he once thought he'd never understand. Little Bird played freely now, laughter echoing through the canyons. And Nita, her heart once broken by loss, found healing in Jake's presence. One evening, as the sun set behind the red cliffs, she placed her hand in his. "You gave me back my daughter," she said softly. "And something more." Jake smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Guess we both found home again." Years later, travelers passing through Arizona would hear stories of a white cowboy who lived among the Apache, a man who'd once saved a lost child and ended up saving himself in the process. Some said he'd married the widow and raised her daughter as his own. Others said he vanished into the desert, never to be seen again. But those who knew the truth said Jake Callahan had finally found what every soul in the Wild West sought: peace, love, and a place to belong beneath the endless sky. And in that silence, his legend lived on forever.